So yeah, welcome guys to our next webinar, Get It Right Internationally, HREFLANG tagging on websites. My name is Björn Beth, I'm your host, working here at Searchmetrics as the Director of Professional Services, heading the internal SEO consulting department. And with me I have the outstanding GIANNA, who joins us today from Go Feminine, and she does a lot of international SEO and is the perfect sparring partner today for this topic. So I would give to you, GIANNA, so that you introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about you and the topic.
I will. Thank you. Hi guys. So just a few words about me, what I've been doing so far. So what you can see in that picture is me and Konni, also known as Konni Lingus. That's my pet octopus. So he's usually with me, and if any one of you is coming to Searchmetrics Summit, you are going to see him live in action. Anyway, so what I've been doing so far, that's obviously not everything I've done in my life. I've had a few other jobs as well, but when it comes to SEO, those are the main acts. So I've been a team lead in a few agencies for SEO, mainly working with big international clients, and I've been an SEO, well, senior SEO manager with chefkoch.de. That's one of the biggest recipe websites there are. I think it's the biggest German-speaking recipe website, actually. And currently I'm international senior SEO manager for the Au Féminin group. That's an international group with women magazines, and on Meta, that's a health online magazine. So before we start, what is the HREFLANG? I can't go through all the basics, obviously, because that would take too much time, but just very quickly what I'm speaking about. And why would you use it? So basically, content language is one of the main aspects to determine how relevant a website's content is to a search query. It's obviously just one of the aspects. So it can be used to, let's say, uniquely assign the content of a website to a language or a region, or both. So some information, why is it called HREFLANG? So href is for hyperlink reference, lang for, you might guess it, language. So it's basically the hyperlink reference for a specific language or region. And that's what it looks like. When you put it into the HTML head section, there are a few other options where you can put it. We are coming to this in a few minutes. But basically that's what it looks like. If you need more information, you can probably see after Searchmetrics Summit, you can have the presentation, and you get clickable links, so you can get more information and all the basics you need in those links. Or you could also come see me at Searchmetrics Summit, which is taking place 21st November. You can ask Konni or me some questions in person.
And if you're interested to join the Searchmetrics Summit, just as a special for you, after this presentation you get a follow-up link with a 50% voucher for a ticket to attend the Searchmetrics Summit here in Berlin at the 21st of November, which is awesome.
It is, it is. Yeah, so we're pretty excited about this. You should be too. The HREFLANG thing for now. So that's a playlist. It's actually really existing in Spotify. So if you look for Get It Right Internationally, then you're getting the playlist for today's presentation. Basically, each song is for one of the main mistakes. So we're covering the 10 most common mistakes you can make with HREFLANG. There's obviously much more you can do wrong. And we're just quickly going through them because there's not that much time. So first song, Code Orange, is for wrong codes. So basically, HREFLANG annotations must either specify the language only. That is what it looks like. That's when you actually specify the language only, FR for French, or language and region. It always goes together. So that's what it looks like here. FR for French, CH for Switzerland. And there are standards as to how each part has. So for language codes, it's a different standard, and for country or region codes, there's another standard. And it's not recommended to use anything else because usually it won't work. It won't be recognized by the Google bot, for example. It is very common that people get this wrong, so that they use the wrong country code. For example, the most common issue is when people want to target users in Great Britain, they use UK, because that's pretty common to, well, speak about the UK, but the actual language code is GB for Great Britain. So that's what people, country code, sorry, so that's what people get wrong a lot of times. Also wrong language code. Language codes are usually have 2 characters, but there are also some languages that have 3. However, in that case, when it comes to English, the correct code is EN for English and not ENG. So as you can see, 40% or 45% of all websites get this wrong. Where did I get this data from? It's from SEMrush. You can probably see this in the very tiny link at the bottom. Did a study with 20,000 websites, and they were looking at hreflang mistakes and how often they were made within this test set they had. So that's where I got this data from.
And is it, are they doing it wrong because they put it automatically and they just pick random data, or is it because the specification of these country codes were done wrong by an SEO?
Well, we don't know really, but well, it depends. If you just refer to your devs and say, look, we need to implement hreflang, and you tell them where they get the codes from, you give them the ISO code lists or the links, then they must not get it wrong. But if you just tell them, look, I give you a list, and they type it by hand, then that's what happens a lot of times. So I guess that's how it happened. However, I don't know how big all the sites were that SEMrush were looking at, but from my experience, I've seen this a lot of times as well. So it's probably pretty accurate that people get this wrong a lot of times. Yeah, it shouldn't happen that way, but it really does. So people have to look into this. There are tools you can use to get the correct codes for you, but I guess not many people are actually using the tools. Next one, something is missing. That's for missing annotations. That's also happening a lot. So what some people do is that they only specify the country code in the hreflang, but not the language. As I've just shown you before, you can specify the language or language and region, but you can't just specify the region. So for some reason. So if you do it like, as you can see here, you can see it in comparison, hreflang GB for Great Britain doesn't work that way. You have to specify the language as well. You can specify any language. You could also do FR-GB, which would target French-speaking people in Great Britain. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but if you want to do that, then you absolutely can do it. But yeah, you have to pick any language there. So that's bad. You must never do that. And this is the good thing. So just for you to remember. Roughly 20% of all websites that have been tested by SEMrush have done this wrong. So it's also pretty common. Next one, wrong road again. That's for invalid characters or an invalid order of the elements in the hreflang. So language and country reference must be divided by a dash. That's what it looks like. So you see, first thing is the correct thing. You have a dash. You must not use an underscore. That is, it looks pretty nice, but it's often it's not working properly. So Google might give you issues in Search Console when you do that. Also, language goes first, country second. So language first and country second. So that's what it should look like always. You don't necessarily have to use capitals like for GB, so for the country code, but that's what people usually do, and it looks better because you can actually see easier what the country code is and what the language code is. So it doesn't happen too often that people get the order wrong. As you can see, it's only 3% of all websites, which is surprising, to be honest. But it's 23% that actually use an underscore. And to be honest, I've done this myself as well, at least once. So it just happens for some reason. It just happens. But it's wrong. So you must not do that. It's very bad. Next one.
Is there, sorry,
yeah.
Just a quick question, maybe for our listeners, might be interesting. Is there any tool you know by heart which can detect those errors, like where can you use a crawler like Screaming Frog? Or,
you can.
Yeah?
Well, you can. You can use you can use Screaming Frog. I'm not covering it in this section. We could think about this for the summit. But yeah, you can actually crawl. Or you can crawl custom values with Screaming Frog, and then you can set and ask, for example, Screaming Frog to look for either is there an hreflang or isn't there an hreflang, but also you could fiddle around until you find out that, yeah, Screaming Frog can actually gather the underscore.
Yeah, and then of course, like Search Console is giving you all the HTML errors. Yeah, based on the HREFLANG annotation, right? So
yes, so it's probably not telling, well, Search Console won't tell you that you've been using an underscore, but it will tell you that there's a reference error. Yeah. And then when you look into it, then, well, they call it return tag errors. And when you look into this, then you can actually see, oh, yeah, it's, there's something wrong. And then, but still you have to think about this, because when you first look at it in Search Console, return tag error means, okay, there's no hreflang, or there's one of the hreflangs missing on a page. When you look into this, then you think, oh, but why? It's there. So it's not very obvious. You just really have to think about this. There are tools to help you generate it, though. Like, for example, Aleda Solis has done a very nice tool that helps. There are a few others, but yeah, if you do it by hand, it's very likely that this happens.
Yeah.
Okay, so no love for my relatives. It's about relative URLs in the hreflang. That's actually a Danish proverb. I hope I got it right. Relatives are the worst friends, said the fox as dogs took after him. That is, well, just to help you remember, hopefully you might remember this saying, so that you don't ever use relative URLs in the hreflang. So.
But relative URLs, like for internal links on the navigation or stuff, is okay. Just
you could do that. I'm not a fan of it personally, but you can totally do that. Yeah. And that's why this happens a lot, because people are using relative URLs throughout their website for internal linking, and then they just do the same for hreflang, and it just seems natural.
Or canonical text.
Or canonical text.
I've seen that as well, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, they could do that, but for hreflang, it doesn't work so well. So that's just to make sure that everybody understands what this is about. So relative links, this is an href like reference for a relative URL. So you can see the first part of the URL, HTTP, www, etc. is missing. This is an absolute URL. So you can see this is the full URL. And that is the thing you are supposed to be doing. So you have to give the proper full URL in the hreflang. Why? Well, you could choose to have CC-TLDs for each country, like the site I'm showing you just now, Al Femminile, is actually an Italian website. So it's the Italian women's magazine, the Italian version of Go Feminin, but they chose to have a .com, so a generic TLD. But they could as well have chosen .it, so a CC-TLD, so you never know, and that's why well, you can have a mix in your hreflangs. It doesn't matter what you choose, but in this case, you really have to give the absolute URL. Well, you have to do this in any case. Roughly 15% of all websites get this wrong, so I'm actually surprised that the number is that low, because I think it's very common to use relative URLs throughout the site. But maybe it got less common in the past few years. I don't know. Next one. Well, you will see I've been a bit lazy. You can see that it still shows no love for my relatives, but we're actually hitting Mambo number 5. Sorry about that, but this from now on it's going to be like that. So Mambo number 5 is for missing confirmation links. You must never ever forget to self-reference. So that is, as you can see, this is the part of hreflangs you can find if you go to gofeminin.de or surfeminine.co.uk. If you go to the section relationships, it's actually well, a category website where you find all articles related to relationships. And you can see this part. So you can see all the sites, and it doesn't matter. If you go to sofeminine.co.uk, you will see the same references. So sofeminine.co.uk will always do self-reference to itself and to all other sites with all the other language versions. If you don't do that, you get return tag errors in Search Console. So again, each of these pages, each of those has to reference back to itself, and it has to set the references to all other pages. So basically, that's what it looks like. You get a So Feminine or UK site. It has to refer or set an hreflang for Tao Feminino Brazil, Go Feminine in Germany, etc. And it has to reference to itself. That's the orange arrow you can see here. And also, all of those have to refer back to So Feminine UK, obviously, and to themselves as well. So people get this wrong a lot for some reason. It's not that hard on the one hand, but on the other hand, it seems logic to not do self-reference. So, but still, you have to keep in mind you always have to do it. It's a bit too small, I guess, but you get. Let's just zoom this in. Yeah, so this is what you get. You get return tag errors in Search Console when you do it, because obviously the return tag is just missing. And this is really bad. 96% of all websites get this wrong. So this is by far the very most common mistake. And I have to be honest, I have never seen a website using hreflang that has not made this mistake at one point. So that's just really a big mistake. But actually, that's one of the things that is easiest to fix. So yeah, but I've actually never seen a website that has actually ever done this correctly. Though that's not true. Go Feminine, they did. Actually, before it started working there. So it's yeah. So they actually did. They made other mistakes with hreflang though, but not this one. Yeah, and now what about those nasty relatives again? So even if you have proper referencing, saying you refer to each language version, each alternate language version of your website and to yourself, if you're using relative links, you are still getting return tag errors in Search Console. And still then you might wonder, why? I've got this self-reference, what is this about? So you really have to be careful there and triple check actually. Or if you get return tag errors, they might not always seem the kind of errors you think they are. You still have to really triple check if it's about, I don't know, you using underscores instead of dashes or anything else, because usually Google Search Console might always give you return tag errors. So next one is more than one way. That's for more than one URL per hreflang. So this is really bad. Do not specify more than one URL per hreflang. So what I mean by this is if you do it like that, so we got 3 different language versions for well, Go Feminine for Germany, Al Femminile for Italy, and O Feminine for Poland. But we specify hreflang, so the language code, German for all the 3. It doesn't work that way. You can do it the other way around. So we can do specify more than one hreflang per URL, but you can't specify more than one URL per hreflang. Then you get Google confused because well, just imagine, basically, Google wants to show the language version that is fitting to the user's search query or, well, the language they're using and the country they're in. So if you don't specify this correctly, or if you give like 3 different URLs for one language, then Google might not know what of those to show. So it is very likely to happen that Google might just ignore this altogether. And if you, let's say you've got a big website and you're doing this on like 40% of your URLs, then Google might assume that the rest of them is faulty as well and might ignore all of those. So you don't want to risk that. You should definitely make sure that you only give one hreflang. So yeah, just to stress this out, that's what I was speaking about. It's very bad, very bad. I'm not good at making beautiful presentations, as you can see. I like Excel much more. Anyway, so surprisingly enough, it's only 3% of websites that are doing this wrong. Maybe because they only have one language version per URL or whatever, but that's actually a good thing. So next one is bad combination. It's about combining tagging methods. So we quickly go through what the methods are. So you got 3 options to set the hreflang. One of them is you can do it in the source code of your website. The downside is this can bloat your code. Imagine you've got, I don't know, let's say 20,000 URLs and you've got 30 languages or regions you want to target, then this has to go for each URL, and that's actually a lot of hreflangs. So it can really bloat your code. You can do it in the XML sitemaps. Also, sitemaps are going to go big, but it's most probably the better option for very large websites. You can also do this with a small website, doesn't matter. Also, it obviously depends on what is easier for you to do or for your devs, depending on your technical setup. But yeah, that's one of the options you can do.
But that's really interesting because I've never done it with sitemaps. Is it so you put the hreflang tag in the sitemap, or you just have for each country version a different sitemap?
No, you have one, well, it depends on your setup of your sitemaps. But if you say you've got one sitemap for Go Feminin, so for all German URLs on gofeminin.de, then for each URL that has different language versions, you specify the URL in the sitemap and underneath the different language versions, so the hreflangs.
Oh, okay.
So this will bloat your sitemaps.
Yeah.
So in any case, hreflang is going to bloat up stuff, but yeah, well, that's probably the better option.
That's interesting.
So I've done that with a few websites, for example, with Deutsche Welle. So we've done that because they got, I think, 30 different languages. So we've done that because there was no way this was going to go into the HTML. Third option in the HTTP header. So you can do that. You can most probably it makes sense for non-HTTP documents like infographics or PDF files, especially for PDF files. They might, well, you might not have an HTML head where you can put it in. You might not have them in a sitemap, but you can still specify the hreflang if you have a PDF file, like let's say an ebook or something in different languages. You can still specify the hreflang for those in the HTTP header, so they have a chance to rank for well, the specific language version. But
in the HTTP header, you just put one, like the specific hreflang tag, not all the others, right?
Well, to be honest, it's been a while since I've done that, but I think you actually have to cross-reference still, because otherwise there's no way, Google has no way to knowing. For example, if you have like a German ebook about hreflang implementation, then you have to specify all other language versions there are, so Italian, French, etc.
But if you have a big site, then that is actually the worst option you have, because if you load the HTTP header, that impacts the performance of loading the page.
Yes, it does. Right? So you shouldn't do this if you, like, let's say you've got 20,000 PDF files or more with 30 different languages each. You shouldn't do it like that. You should find another way, or just hope that Google gets it right. Otherwise, well, you could do landing pages and, you know, and actually optimize the landing pages and set the hreflangs in the XML sitemaps, so the landing page for each ebook, for example, can rank well, and people then can click on the PDF file to download it. But for the PDF files, as such, you shouldn't do it if you've got really a lot of them, obviously, because that will definitely bloat your header. So as I said, in any case, hreflang, if you've got a lot of sites or if you've got a lot of languages, especially if you've got a lot of languages or regions you want to target, this is going to bloat your code. wherever you put it, basically. So, well, someone was asking, and actually that makes a lot of sense, they were asking this just a few weeks ago, if there is a limit for hreflang specifications per page, because obviously you could target 200 languages. But John Muller said there is no limit. So, but as he said, for a large amount of hreflang entries, you probably want to use a sitemap, but still, yeah, there's no limit. That's can be a good thing or a bad thing. That's up to you to decide. So people might think it might be a good idea to combine these methods, like specifying half of them per page in the sitemap, specifying half of them in the header or something. It's not a good idea, because you can make a lot of things wrong. So basically it has to be synchronized. So if you combine, let's say you tag all your sites in the XML sitemap and in the HTML head, they have to be exactly the same. If they are not, and chances are if you use both of them, that there is some fuck up somewhere. For example, let's say you've got a lot of, you've got product sites, for example, and you've got a lot of fluctuation when it comes to products. So let's say you've got Nike shoes in, well, on your French website, on your Italian website, and on the UK website, but they're out of stock on the UK side. So you delete the hreflang reference for the UK side, but you only delete this in one of those locations, like in the sitemap, but you still have it in the HTML. This is obviously wrong. Chances are, if that's not actually synchronized, Google might ignore it or be confused. And then hreflang should not point to somewhere, some site that's actually not existing. We'll come to that in a bit, but still, it is very easy to have misleading hreflang markup then, and you should not do that. Obviously, if you go through the pain of implementing it, you should definitely make sure it's correct. Okay, next one is, let's say, a really, really, really bad idea. So there are ideas that are actually worse than combining the tagging methods. So that is hreflang and canonical. If you implement hreflang along the canonical, you can have a lot of issues. What you can see here are just some typical canonical use cases. I just did a screenshot from Google. So typical use cases for canonicals only, without the hreflang, are, for example, you have dynamic URLs. You can see here it's probably a shop for dresses, and the filter options like filtering for green colored dresses is, well, basically creating a new URL with a parameter. And this is when you can use a canonical to actually always refer back to the URL without the parameter. You can have this in blog systems as well. They might have different categories, for example, your articles are in, so you have different URLs, and Google should know which one is the canonical URL, so the main URL that should be indexed. Also, well, Google say they actually, the canonical URL gets all the link juice from all different versions of your URL, but this is not the case with hreflang. People think they are the same. They're not, so you always have to keep that in mind. Other options are, well, you serve the same content for, like, let's say, the www subdomain, each with or without, or HTTP protocol versus HTTPS, and so on. So it's not a good option to do it that way. You should use redirects, but if you don't, then you should set the canonical. Yeah, or you have a content syndication. Let's say you write a really nice ebook about hreflang, and you get it published somewhere else, which is not your site, then it's probably better that they refer to your site as the canonical URL, because otherwise they might rank better than you, who is the one who actually made the post, or, well, you get the idea. So those are the typical canonical use cases. They might not be the only ones, but the most typical ones. But combining those is generally not recommended. You can do that, but it's not recommended because you can have so many fuck-ups when it comes to this. Well, let's say you've got an alternate print version of your page. Let's say you've got loads of recipes, and each of those recipes can be printed out and the print version is another URL, minus ads, minus whatever else, then yeah, you can do that, go ahead. But still you have to be careful. Let's look at it that way. So what people sometimes do is, let's say you've got a website in English and you want to target US customers, UK customers and Australian customers, and basically the content might always be the same. But you've got different URLs, .com, .co.uk and so on. So basically that's duplicate content. It's not really recommended to use HREFLANG to, well, to get rid of duplicate content that way, but you could do that. Maybe if you've got a shop, then you might have different currencies for each country. Though Google said that, well, if the only difference is different currencies, they no longer recommend using HREFLANG in that case. But anyway, if you wanted to do it that way, then you would, for example, let's say your US site is the main site, then that refers with HREFLANG to the Australian site, the UK site, and the UK site refers back to the US site with an HREFLANG, obviously, you always got to reference back, and with a canonical, because they say, well, basically, website A, the US site, is the main website.
But even if you have the language specified in the HREFLANG tag. Oh,
yeah, even then. You could do that, but it's no longer recommended. What happens now if you do it that way? Well, I've got it a bit bigger. Did I? Yes. Bam. So what happens if you do it that way? Let's say you are in the UK, in London, and you're looking for Nike shoes, but your canonical site is the US shop. So basically, in the search, so in your search results on Google, you get the link to the UK site because Google sees, oh, you're in the UK, you probably want to have the UK site, not the US site, because Google knows by your HREFLANG. But because of the canonical, Google shows you the title and the meta description of the US shop.
Oh, that's bad, actually. Huh?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Well, it depends. If they all look the same, it's not that bad, but then it's still duplicate content. But most of the time you have some kind of reference towards the country in the title tag, and well, that's not what you want. So basically for the user, it looks like, oh, that's a US site. You might not click. Currently, you still have the URLs shown in the search results, but there have been tests by Google to no longer show the URL, but only the breadcrumb instead, for example. And that way, you might, as a customer, you might not actually see if it's a UK or US website. And that way, you might not click on it, but you might decide to click on something that is actually more local or looks more local.
Mm-hmm. So what, I mean, if the case is that my US site has a common domain, the Australian site has an Australian domain, and the UK has a .co.uk domain, but let's take the example, all the three sites are running on the common domain with a subfolder for each language, then you still have to canonicalize an HREFLANG? Well,
you should use the HREFLANG. Well, it depends. If they're just really duplicates, I'm not sure if I would recommend to have it that way, because that way you have loads of duplicate pages with duplicate content. It doesn't matter if you use canonical and HREFLANG. Well, you can do that, but still Google no longer recommend it because they can see that they are just really the same. And you want to target your customers correctly, and well, you will target them correctly, most probably, but to them it will look like a non-local result in the search results, so they might just choose someone else. So I would recommend it. What you could do, if the only thing that changes is the currency, you could just do it dynamically within your page and have the customers choose the currency, for example. So there's a lot of options you can do, but that's probably not the best. You can still do it, but you have to be very careful. So you should only ever use the canonical. Usually, best option is only to refer to your own site. Like, let's say you have the print version, so the canonical should point towards that within the same country URL. If you do it otherwise, there's a lot of fuck-up potential, so I'd be very careful with that. It's also very complex, so actually you could do a whole session just about that. So, yeah. Next one, you know I'm no good. This is for HREFLANG and NOINDEX, so that is even worse. But it's not that complex. Actually, it's pretty simple. So just so everybody knows what we're talking about, I mean, I hope you do, otherwise you might not have decided to listen to this webinar, but in case you don't, that's the way you could use the NOINDEX in your HTML code to tell Google that if they crawl this website, this is on, they should not index it. You should never ever combine this with HREFLANG, like really never, never. And actually it's pretty simple because you tell Google do not index this site, but on the other hand there's an HREFLANG pointing to a NOINDEX site or a NOINDEX site pointing to others. So I've seen this recently with the canonical URL. So you have canonicals combined with NOINDEXes. Actually, the canonical URL might inherit the NOINDEX even. So that's very bad. I have not yet heard of anyone where the HREFLANG site would inherit the NOINDEX, but I certainly wouldn't risk it. And also it doesn't really make sense. So you don't want to have this indexed, that's what you're telling Google. And on the other hand, to tell them, yes, you should index it for the language German and you should index the other ones for other languages. Doesn't make sense. However, if you want to if you want to prevent this from happening, the NOINDEX might hide somewhere where you don't actually see it. It might be in the HTTP header. You can have it there. It might be in the HTML head. Or you might have something else which is very, very nasty. In the robots.txt, you might have disallowed the folder your URL is in. And if it's disallowed, then Google can't really crawl the HREFLANG annotations. But it might. So let's say you've got other URLs that are pointing to the UK site with an HREFLANG saying, look, there's the English version. And then those URLs are actually disallowed. The target URLs doesn't really make sense. So you have to really make sure that you find everything, all ways where you could tell Google not to index or crawl the site, because that's really wrong. Next one, as always, you were wrong again. That's pretty similar now, but status codes. HREFLANG must not point to sites giving any status codes that give directives as to not index the site. For example, redirects. Or client errors, like 404 or 410. Obviously, that doesn't make sense if you have HREFLANGs pointing towards URLs that are no longer existent. Or server errors. So those are the things you should not do.
In any case, regardless of if it's an HREFLANG tag.
Yeah, you shouldn't do this in any case, but it does happen with HREFLANG a lot as well. It can happen, this is actually an issue for very big websites. Like if you've got big job search engines or recipe search engines, just really large websites where there is a lot of fluctuation as to whether a certain URL is online or not, or online shops where there are products that might be in stock this week but out of stock next week, then this can happen very easily. But you should try to find a technical solution that this doesn't happen. I mean, you could do cron jobs every morning or every night and then just make sure that, like, actually, in my opinion, it doesn't matter if you've got an HREFLANG pointing towards a redirect for a day. But if you have this going on for a week or two, it's definitely not a good idea. So basically, that's something that you can actually keep in mind as a general rule of thumb. If it is not supposed to be in an XML sitemap, then it's definitely not suitable for an HREFLANG. Basically, that's the easiest thing you can think about, hopefully, to memorize when you can actually have an HREFLANG pointing towards a site or not. So yeah, that's very important to keep in mind. Again, as I just told you, because it actually fits to the rule of thumb, it shouldn't be an XML sitemap, so this applies to no indexed sites or pages that do canonicals that point with a canonical to any page other than themselves, because then it doesn't make sense. On the one hand, you tell them, look, this is the English version of my page, there's the URL for the UK version, and on the other hand, the UK version says, well, but actually I'm not the canonical, it's somewhere else. So it doesn't make sense. So that's basically already it, and I actually quicker than I thought I might. I thought that I might actually take 1.5 hours or something. Sorry, I've got to laugh, but Björn is actually currently taking a picture of us.
I will send it to our Searchmetrics Twitter profile, and maybe they will retweet it.
Wow, yeah, I hope so. Guys, please do so. Anyway, so there's more to dub, is actually the bonus material. So there's not much bonus material, but what I could wanted to tell you, at Searchmetrics Summit, I'll cover the same topic, but I'll go into some, well, I'll cover basically the same things, but more deeply. And I might also address HREFLANG issues for really big websites and latest changes and comments by Google on language and region targeting. So you could, well, you should definitely join us at Searchmetrics Summit. Sorry that I have to say this again, but it's going to be exciting, and obviously I'm not the only speaker there. So there are a lot of other really, really interesting topics. For example, about JavaScript and SEO. This is going to be huge. Yes. So you should definitely go there.
So we will have a lot of speakers there from big brands such as Adidas is telling us how they want to grow their e-commerce business from 2 billion to 4 billion by 2020, and search is a big driver for this. So this will be really interesting. Another great publishing houses here from Germany, Co-Feminine, Searchmetrics is there. So a lot of really well-known speakers. As I said, you get a 50% discount. We will send it with the follow-up email after this webinar.
Yeah, very good. So you definitely should come see us there. You can also see Konni, my pet octopus. So that's going to be exciting. He's excited already. And also, if you've got any questions that we can't cover today, then you could definitely ask them to me in person at the summit or after the summit. You could also either drop me a line on Facebook. Oh, I just gave you the wrong link for the Spotify playlist. Hijack My Heart was for another conference. Doesn't matter. I'll change this for the summit. And you can find me on Telegram. I don't know if any one of you is using Telegram Messenger.
I'm using.
Woo! Yeah.
Woo.
So you can either find me as Tentacle Lady, that's my username there, but also I've got a group which is called Ginger SEO, and I specifically created this for the summit and this webinar. So you can ask any questions about HREFLANG there, or also any other SEO questions, obviously. If you want to get an invite into the group, because you can't just find it on Telegram just as it is, then just drop me a line at Tentacle Lady and I'll just add you. Well, Telegram is free to use, so it's definitely worth having a look at it if you don't use it already, and it's, well, actually it works a lot better on my phone than WhatsApp, so yeah. And if you're very much into privacy, Telegram might not be such a bad idea. Yeah, so I'll be happy to hear from you. But if there are there any questions?
Yeah, we
already?
have 2 questions actually before I jump into them. If you have any questions now, just drop us your question in the question chat, and we will try to answer it as quick as possible. So jumping into the first question, which is on canonicals. If you had an English site which was being translated to Russian language, but not all content on the Russian side was translated yet, would you canonicalize the page in English on the Russian side to the English pages in the meantime?
No. No, I wouldn't. Well, basically, Google can see if your language, the language you give, is consistent. So what happens a lot of times, for example, is that people translate, for example, the navigation, but they don't translate the content, or the other way around, they translate the content, but not the navigation. But it doesn't matter if you use a canonical or not, actually, because this will always give issues with Google, or might. Google will try to understand whether or not the language you specify in the HREFLANG is the language of your content. So basically, if you say the target website is Russian, but it's not, or let's say 90% of the content is not Russian, then this is going to give you issues in Search Console. Google might not actually accept the hreflang then. So basically you should always try to have it translated fully, but if you haven't, I still wouldn't set a canonical because it is not the same. So you do have different content there in a different language. You could just try set the hreflang for Russian and hope that it works.
So the same guy actually has a follow-up question on this. So you would have pages on .com/ru in English with ru href tags.
I have no. Actually, I'm not really sure if I understand your question. It would be lovely if you could specify this if you're still on.
Yeah, so we jump to another question. But that would mean in the UK the pages in the index would be the US version which have US spelling.
Yes.
I think that's the that is the chart you have just chosen with canonical.
Yes.
And you know this.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that would actually mean it. So and that is well, that actually would make it look as if the site that is in the result search results would be the US site, because yeah, it's US spelling then.
So you would have pages on com/ru in English with Russian HREFLANG. It would be entirely the same content, complete duplicates. So
yeah, well, if it, yeah, let's say as far as I understand you, the guy with the Russian and not so Russian websites. So basically, you've got the /ru where your Russian sites or website versions are supposed to be, but they have not been translated yet, and they are fully English, but they are hosted under /ru. In that case, yes, you should set the canonical and not the hreflang, because then they are canonicals. They are, well, they're not the canonicals, but they are duplicates. Obviously, if they're full duplicates, that's the only way you can do it. Obviously, it doesn't make sense to use the hreflang there because it's not the language that you're giving there. It's not a good idea, I guess. Oh, what's happening there?
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, well, basically, you guys can't see it, but my Evernote just realized that there's an update, and that's why it.
Okay, so if there's no other question, I'd say thank you, Gianna, for joining us. It was really interesting. Actually, I know that from my experience as well. It's something you don't look like. It doesn't get the focus it should have.
Yeah.
So people are just doing it like, yeah, the HREFLANG will work out somehow. But you just showed us that it's really critical to really take a deep dive into this and really make it right. And yes, as we said, you will get the slides and the voucher for the summit and a follow-up email here. We say thank you to Gianna, and hopefully you enjoyed the webinar, and you can listen to our next webinars, which will be sent out by a newsletter. And yeah, have a great day, Gianna.
Yeah, thank you guys. Your questions were very kind. They were not the hardest ones. I was actually afraid of having worse than that. So but anyway, if you have some other very nasty questions, just drop me a line somewhere. Facebook or Telegram are the best options. I rarely read emails for some reason. And yeah, and I'd be very happy to see you at Searchmetrics Summit.
Okay, perfect. See you then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.